Yesterday, my daughter Imi and I were watching Les Miserables, and one thing that stood out to me, as it often does, was the conflict between Jean Valjean, played by Hugh Jackman, and Javert, played by the mighty Russell Crowe. Jean Valjean is an ex-con. He's on parole. He's not a bad man. He was originally arrested and put in prison for stealing bread to feed his hungry family. But in Javert's eyes, a sin is a sin, a crime is a crime, and he deserves to be in prison. But when he's released, he starts a new life, a process of redemption, where he learns from his mistakes and he begins to use his newfound freedom for the benefit of others. It is a beautiful story of redemption if you're unfamiliar with it. But Javert, Russell Crowe, the government officer, isn't one for redemption. He believes once a crook, always a crook. He fails to see Jean Valjean's ability to change. He fails to see things in a gracious way. He lives by the letter of the law. Punishment is prescribed and must always be carried out. No questions asked, no quarter given. He sees things as very black and white and sees justice as a simple matter. When seeking to arrest a prostitute who has just defended herself against a man who's trying to harm her, he responds by singing, "I have heard such protestations every day for 20 years. Let's have no more explanation. Save your breath, save your tears. Honest work, just reward. That's the way to please the Lord." I mention this because I reckon this is how Job's friends picture God. Just like this, right? Honest work, just reward. It's simple. They actually rightly believe God to be a God of justice. And they continually point this out to Job. However, they just see God too simplistically. They assume they can fit God into a neat box, into an equation. Honest work, just reward. That's the way to please the Lord. And nothing outside of this mindset, nothing outside of this little box that they've drawn for God can possibly be considered. And I think this simplistic, reductionistic view of God is at the heart of Job's friends' poor advice. Because of their simplistic view, they miss the beauty of complexity. And also Job, he fails to recognize the possibility of grace. And this is why we need to read all of the wisdom literature in context. Proverbs gives us the black and white, right? If you do this, you'll receive that. And if you stop there and only read Proverbs, you'll be like Job and his mates and see God and his justice and his working in the world as something very simplistic and black and white. But as you read Ecclesiastes and here in Job, you begin to realize that God works in ways that confound us and surprise us. And this is the space where we can feel frustrated and angry at God, where we want to cry out to him and ask questions, and that's okay. But it's also the space where grace operates. This unusual, crazy, unintelligible space. But when we reduce God to a simple, transactional judge, we run the risk of missing out on his grace and miss being able to marvel in the beauty of his divine, otherworldly wisdom. God doesn't operate in a way that makes sense to us. Paul, in the New Testament, calls this the foolishness of God. 1 Corinthians 1, 22-25 says, "Jews demand a sign, and Greeks look for wisdom, but we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." As Christians, we should be acutely aware of the surprising way God acts. It appeared unjust for Jesus to undergo the suffering he did. It seemed foolish that the sinless Son of God would undergo torture and death, but God used this to bring about his plan. Now, this doesn't lessen the impact of our suffering, but it does call for our trust, and we must remember that confusing, confounding place where seemingly unjust suffering happens is also the place where grace operates, that confusing space that seems to make no sense to our human minds. And as I said, it should leave us in awe of God. Paul says in Romans 11:33-36, "Oh, the depth of the riches of the wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable his judgments and his paths beyond all tracing out. Who has known the mind of the Lord? Or who has been his counselor? Who has ever given to God that God should repay them? For from him and through him and for him are all things. To him be the glory forever." Amen. Now, of course, there are some things that are black and white about God. We know that he is the one true God. We know the only way to come to him is through Jesus Christ and his sacrifice on our behalf. These things have been revealed to us clearly in the scriptures, but there is a lot of place for ambiguity in the scriptures. There is a lot of places where we just are not in a position or a headspace to understand how God operates and works. And so as we go today, ask yourself, where am I reducing God and his judgment to a simple formula? What box do I have God in? What do I need to let him break free of in a way that will be helpful for me and my theology and my ministering to others? And then come to him in honesty and humility, asking for his strength as you trust him. Go in peace.